G'day, Dom. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good. It's a beautiful morning here in Australia.
Well, I'll tell you, for those of us who aren't in Australia, starting this podcast off with a nice good day couldn't be better. You brought a smile to everybody's face.
Thanks, Dom.
Hey, great to have you with us. And, the reason I invited you to join us on the Cabinet Maker Profit System podcast is because you're one of our peers. I mean, you make beautiful, stunning, what's called bespoke furniture.
Oh, thanks, Dom. Yeah, we do a range of contemporary fine furniture and we specialise in chairs, which is a very deliberate strategy, which I'm sure we'll get to. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, can you give us a little bit of context? Because people in Australia might know about you, and then in the South Pacific, New Zealand, and other countries are out there might know of you. But in North
Yep.
America, where the majority of my listeners are, and in Europe, they may not have heard of you before. So tell us, who's Evan Dunstone and what do you guys do on that context?
All right. Well, I'll try and give you the Reader's Digest version. I was trained by David McLaren, who originally came from New York, and he worked in a workshop in New York for a while under George Nakashima's foreman. This chap had moved on, and anyway, so David had really good basic training, and then he moved to Australia because he met an Australian girl, and then he's developed a thing called the Bungendore Woodworks Gallery, which is Australia's leading wood gallery. And I came across him when I was in my early 20s, and I'd never seen contemporary fine woodwork before. And I literally walked into the gallery and went, I've got to do this. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to do it. I've never seen things made with intent like this before.
Yeah.
And I just said to David, mate, you got to give me a job. I'll do anything. I'll paint the walls. I'll do whatever it takes. And so the gallery at that stage was booming, and we represented nearly 100 craftsmen from all over Australia.
Wow.
But David was trying to get his own workshop up and running. And through one way or another, I ended up working in his workshop, and we developed that workshop and hired guys and started supplying the gallery with some stuff that David had designed and that we were making in the workshop. And then in 1998, very sadly, the workshop burnt down one hot summer's night.
It burnt.
And it burnt down, destroyed 25 years of accumulated machinery and jigs and templates and so on. And, all our gear, everything. So I was sort of in the situation where I said to my wife, if I want to work at this level, we've got to do our own thing. There's nobody who's going to employ us. There's no jobs in fine woodworking that we knew of. So, we went out and bought all the machinery with money we didn't have to run a workshop that made all the classic mistakes. And fortunately, she's the brains behind the operation, because she looked at the numbers and she said, Evan, you worked for about $3 an hour this year. And it was pretty harsh. So the first year out was tough. And then as luck would have it, we live in a small town of Bungendore. It's like 3,000 people. But it just happens that there's another furniture manufacturer called Unique Furniture in Bungendore. I mean, it's ridiculous that a small town like ours has two very significant operations. And they needed a chairmaker. And so I looked at it and I thought, well, I've got a 1-year-old baby and I've just worked for nothing. So I went in and I said to Jerry, who owned Unique, can I make all your chairs on piece rates? Right. And he went, absolutely, man, desperate because I need chair makers and they're so rare. Yeah. Now, I'd been trained and I was walking into a big factory and I realised how important my basic training was, because they had fabulous gear and great guys, great people, but really big gear that basically did, one process. So they'd have, 4 spindle molders set up, and each spindle molder would do a specific job. And then they got a chairmaker's spindle molder in, and that was basically my spindle molder to play with and do all the chairs on. And I just thought, wow, what an amazing tool. And I realised that, I came from the nerdy Crenovian sort of woodworking school, and then suddenly I'm seeing all this kit and you can do anything you like. And it just really blew my mind. It really opened things up. And then I was lucky enough to get a thing called a Churchill Fellowship. So in Australia, a Churchill Fellowship is awarded to people who are specialists in unusual fields that don't have specific support. So like if you were a doctor, there's plenty of ways to get scholarships as a doctor, but there's not many ways in Australia to get a scholarship as a chairmaker, for example.
It's very
So,
specific. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it opened up a lot of doors. So I was able to travel to England for 6 weeks, visiting small workshops. So, you know, I spent a week at the Royal Workshops in London and visited people like Wayward Furniture in the Cotswolds and Richard Williams in Amersham. And then I came to the States and I did a week at the North Bennett Street School and a week up at the school in Maine, the Centre for Furniture Craftsmanship, and a week with Brian Boggs in Kentucky. Man, that was amazing. That guy knows chairs. Wow. Anyway, came back to Australia all juiced up and explained to my wife that I thought I knew what I was doing now. And so we set up Dunstone Design in 2003. Now we've developed to become chair specialists, but we make contemporary fine furniture. We'll make anything from a simple one-off commission through to, you know, big custom boardroom tables.
Right. So you do the tables as well as the chairs, or the chairs for
we do tables and cabinets and chairs, and we've made lecterns. We've even made a bishop's crozier. So if it's made out of wood, we've done it.
Yeah.
In fact, you know, I've been in the industry now for nearly 25 years. And I made my first kitchen this year.
Your first kitchen, really?
First kitchen. A resawn briar oak, which is a far north Queensland timber, absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
But we've got a dedicated resaw, and we cut all our own veneers. So we made this amazing resawn veneer kitchen. It was pretty cool.
So you know what you bring up. So talking about the technical, the geeky side of all of us, can you just for a second tell us the woods that other people around the world don't realize come from Australia? What are some of the woods you normally work with that for us would be premier?
Well, our normal timber, the timber that we use the most is Victorian blackwood, which is Acacia melanoxylon, and it's a close cousin to koa, which you get in Hawaii. And it's Australia's premium cabinet timber. It's sort of the black walnut of Australia. Okay. It's your go-to high-end timber. And we deal with a guy in Victoria down in Yakandanda. There's a good name for you. So Dennis Brown from Yakandanda. And I buy from him because I think he's the best miller. He's got the best drying setup. He's a terrific bloke to deal with. So we use a lot of blackwood. But we also have amazing timbers like River Red Gum and Jarrah, which are the red timbers, you know, the classic Australian reds. Yeah. But just in the last 8 months, and I'll have to declare an interest here, I'm the brand ambassador for a Queensland company called Branch 95, and they work with Indigenous communities up in the far north Queensland, and they get amazing timbers like this briar oak I was telling you about, but they get northern silky oak, which is, you guys call it lacewood in North America. Just stunning Queensland timbers. Yeah, really amazing stuff.
A lot of people are drooling right now thinking about what they could be making with that stuff. But that's the technical side. We don't deal with the technical side much on this, but I knew that when you talked about the woods there that you were using, that some people would be interested in, you know, what's normal for you and what's normal for us are two completely different things. So
yeah, sure.
Let's talk about the business side there. You know, you chose a very specific, bespoke furniture in itself is specific. And then chairs is very specific. What are some of the lessons from a business side that you can give us on that other people listening could understand and maybe apply to their own companies as they're going through growth?
Well, I guess I should start this by saying that my wife's a professional bookkeeper and she works with big companies. And so she brought to our business an understanding of what a company should look like. You know, she could tell me things like, hey, if you're spending more than a certain percent on rent, then that's outside the industry normal. If you're spending more than a certain percentage of your turnover on electricity, that's outside the industry normal. So our structure was very deliberate. We realised that in order to do what we needed to do, we needed to divide our overhead by a number of craftsmen. We also needed good productivity from those craftsmen. And especially in England, what I was seeing was they would work in converted barns with, maybe not even three-phase power necessarily.
Wow.
Everything was really inefficient. They used a lot of really old machinery. And then when I was in North America, I met a lot of people like Brian Boggs who worked out of dedicated workshops. But the thing that really influenced my business more than anything else was going to the Thomas Mosier workshop in Maine.
Uh-huh.
And that was a really beautifully set up and was huge, 70 employees. But just the logic of how they did everything, the way it was set up was really informative to me.
Mm-hmm.
So we've always worked on the premise of having 3 or 4 makers on staff plus me. So the workshop either has 4 or 5 makers at any one time. In the early days, I was on the tools a lot more, but I'm not on the tools terribly much these days. I'm in the workshop the whole time, but my job is to guide craftsmen, not make things, if that makes sense.
That's an excellent point, Evan. That's a really, really good point. As your company grows, the unfortunate or fortunate thing is you can't be on the tools if you're growing the business, and vice versa.
Yeah.
You can't grow the business if you're on the tools.
Yep. One of the early decisions that Fenella said was to make sure that you price everything on what your best maker can make it, not what you can make it on. Because you can't hire yourself. You can only hire other people. And no matter how dedicated your staff are, they're never going to work with the same level of intent that you do. So what you have to do is make sure that your structure reflects the productivity of well-trained, talented people, but people who are working for the wage rather than, owning the business.
Yeah, I figure.
Sorry.
Sorry, I know we've got a bit of a lag time because this call is bouncing off a satellite in space. So, but let me phrase this in the form of a question. We've got your productivity as the owner of a business. What do you think that next best maker's productivity is relative to yours? If you're 100x, what are they?
Well, we work out on a 75% productivity rate. So for every, and that's an across the board average. So our makers should be productive, that is doing billable time, 75% of the time that they're being paid to be there.
Okay.
Now, in reality, my best guy is Alex, who's a freak of nature. I think he's the best maker in Australia, but nobody's ever heard of him because he hates woodworkers and he doesn't want to talk about, he doesn't like the scene. He just likes to sit in the smoko room and look at Instagram and complain about everybody.
Yeah.
But then when he gets on the tools, he's amazing. And if I'm honest, I'm terribly lucky that I ever found him because I hired him as a 17-year-old and he's been with me for 12 years. He's my workshop manager. So it's an unfair, the question's slightly loaded.
Okay, I see.
He's better than me on my best day, but don't tell him that. No, he knows. He knows.
It's just between us on this global podcast. But do you figure it's around that 80%, a normal high quality journeyman? Do you use that word journeyman over there? Would that be about 80% of you?
Yeah, when we say the 75 figure, that's from the apprentice through to the craftsman. That's how we work out billable hours. But yeah, Alex is probably, 85, 90% billable.
Yeah.
But certainly the 75 to 80% billable is our productivity. It's very difficult. The biggest difficulty we have is because there's so much skill variation in our company.
Right.
Like the complexity of a job. Our waterfall stools, which are our bread and butter, can be made after about 4 years training. But the Cascade rocker, to be able to make it at the sort of productivity level that Alex can, takes probably 6 or 7 years of experience. That's from raw wood through to a finished product.
You absolutely run a very high-end bespoke shop. Those are some amazing knowledge gains that people have to have in order to be able to produce that product.
Yeah, and to give you some idea, our chairs start at about $1,200-1,300 Australian, and they go up to $6,000 each. And it's just a reflection of time and materials. All our pricing is this many hours and that much material. There's no smoke and mirrors there.
I love it. $6,000 chair. I'd love to sit in that. I don't know if my butt would qualify.
Well, it always amazes me. People will spend all this time and effort, they'll invite friends over and they'll spend all day cooking and they'll go out and select beautiful wine and, they'll hope for great weather and they'll put on a real show and then get people to sit in lousy chairs.
Yeah, no, there's
I don't
nothing.
get chairs are one of the most intimate things you can offer somebody. They're sitting around your table, having a great time, drinking beautiful wine, having lovely food, sitting in a great chair. That's conviviality, man. That's great.
So this is a weird overlay, but when my
Mm.
wife went to university, she's a photography major, and her specialty in photography was chairs.
Oh, well, there you go. Good on her. She's
Huh?
great.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah, she's great. What we say here is I outkicked my coverage, and that's an American football term. That's an American football term. So what I hear from you, though, if I go back to the learning, is that you went back to
Yes.
the numbers. I mean, you were fortunate that your wife is your bookkeeper.
Yes.
So if I can make a horrible joke, even if she's embezzling, it adds up to your benefit anyway. But you
Absolutely.
and don't tell her I said that. But the bookkeeper is a big issue. It's a big challenge. Whoever looks after the numbers, really, we need to have a really tight communication level with them so that we understand those key metrics. We call them metrics here
Mm.
that you're talking about there. Really simple things. Now there's benchmarking tools that I use for talking about percentages and cost of goods sold, but any other numbers that popped up for you that you found really interesting and that you've moved your business forward based on?
I think I'm going to give you a slightly long-winded answer to that. One of the biggest problems I find for people like us is that we can't afford the quality of bookkeeping I've got. Our business doesn't turn over millions of dollars, and my contemporaries can't necessarily afford to pay, market rate for the sort of brains trust that I've got in the house.
Yeah.
But if we circle back a little bit, one of the reasons I wanted to specialize in chairs was that I realized that to be good at chairs, you need very good equipment. And if you sell enough chairs, I mean, our turnover is roughly 60% chairs of one sort or another. And we can lease against productivity a key piece of equipment that will give us an advantage in chairs that then gives us a trickle down on cabinets and everything else. And I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
In 2010, we had a big order for 40 chairs. Now, for us, that's a fairly significant order. And at the time, I needed a new thicknesser. And I looked at all the thicknesses available, and the one that did all the things we needed to do was the Martin thicknesser. Now, if you know machinery, Martin is absolutely the top of the range, at least available from Australia. Martin is the last word. And, I was comparing it to the SEM, which was about 22,000, and the Martin came in at 30 grand. And so I looked at it and I said, okay, it had a few features that I thought would make us slightly more productive. And my wife said, okay, you need to tell me on average how many hours a month having the Martin at an extra $8,000 is going to increase your productivity across your whole year's production to tell me whether leasing that machine makes more sense than leasing the next one down. And when we did the numbers, it was clear that the Martin was going to give us that advantage. And then if you extrapolate it, at the time I was 40 and I thought, well, I'm probably going to work till 65. Yeah. So I should get another 25 years out of this machine. I'm going to lease it for 3 years. I think it's going to be revenue neutral for 3 years. And that means I'm going to get 23 or 22 years of basic free bonus efficiency. And that's exactly how it's worked out.
Yeah.
So our strategy is buy the very best equipment in its class, because our guys are so trained and so expensive that if you can buy an advantage through a good piece of kit, then it absolutely pays for itself across a team of 4.
Yeah.
If you're just working by yourself, all the maths are different.
Well, I think the question that your wife, you said her name is Fenella?
Yes.
Brilliant question on her part. Tell her that came from a business coach. But also brilliant for you for listening to your wife as your business partner and having that really gutsy conversation about, okay, that's the piece of equipment we need. There's no discussion there. Tell us why that one over that one. and then let's do the math. And that changes things. It really, removing emotion from a buying decision, especially a major capital decision, is a big deal.
Well, Don, one of the things she did was I once convinced her to take out a vehicle on a 4-year lease. And she said, you know, show me the argument why we should do this on 4/3. And I said, well, it's easier on cash flow and blah, blah, blah. And she said, well, the maths doesn't really back you up on this, because by the time you look at interest and cash flow burden over 4 years, there's a strong argument. If you can argue that you need the vehicle, you should also be able to present a case to me that it should be a 3-year lease. And I basically talked her into doing a 4-year lease. And every month in the 4th year, she'd say, you're wasting money again on that bloody car. Because we could have done this in 3 years and it would have saved us, I can't remember the numbers, but it would have saved us a certain amount of money. And, it's very nice when the lease is paid off, especially in a small business with ours with a relatively small turnover.
Mm-hmm.
When you stop paying, I just stopped paying a lease on our dust extractor, which is $1,700 a month. Man, that's going to go straight in my pocket now.
Yeah, no kidding.
I'm happy, man, that that's paid off. But it also, she forced me into the 3-year lease on that. And, it's been worth having, but now it's really worth having.
Yeah, no kidding. So just for the record, I'm afraid of your wife.
So am I. So am my staff. When I say, oh, look, Fenella's turning up, they'll go, oh, geez, sort things out and try and look more efficient.
Try to look more efficient. I love it. Well, I think you've given us today one of the most important lessons that we can underscore for any of our friends and associates in this business is to really understand our numbers. It can be painful to go back and look at the metrics, but it's more painful to stick your head in the sand. And I'll go right to the end here and say one day have the auctioneer show up to clear out your stuff.
Look, everybody who's been in this game has come close to the wire. I don't know a single furniture maker or woodworker, especially at our level, who hasn't been right up to the wire. I mean, we've been up to the wire, 2 or 3 times over the last 15 years, where you just think, man, I just really need to sell something. I really need to sell something, because we have so much capital tied up in the piece that if you don't, one of the things that we've tried to do is reduce floor stock and just build to order.
Right.
And that build to order model, I mean, it comes with swings and roundabouts. There's if we get an order for 8 chairs, which is normal, we really have to make 9 to get 8, because if we're making 8, they've all got to be colour matched. They're all from the one log. They're all perfectly matched. But if you lose one in the last element of production, suddenly you've got to go back and make 1 chair from scratch, which is terribly inefficient. So again, we did the numbers and realised we're better off making 9 chairs to get 8. And then if we end up with the 9th chair, okay, we can sell it as a one-off,
right?
Maybe even discount it if we have to. But that's a much better cost model than to make 8, lose 1, and then have to go back and make an 8th to match the 7 that you got. Because Mrs. Smith isn't going to care. She said, I want those chairs. I'm paying $2,000.
And they better match.
They're
right?
supposed to be right.
Yeah.
And of course, one of the things that, for all our love of timber in Australia, we have far more colour variation. Say in Blackwood, the colour range is enormous. And this is something I don't see in North American timbers. And I had to laugh in England. I'd go into, meetings where the maker is talking to the client, and as far as I could tell, they're arguing over which shade of tan you want. In Australia, Blackwood goes from straw colour through to really dark and stormy, man. It's huge. So colour matching is a big deal, and it's something that we have to cost in. That's a very different scenario to what I've seen, particularly in England, but also North America.
Yeah, that's another valuable takeaway that many of your contemporaries would have to consider as well, as making that 9th chair. But that same argument can be had when people say, Dom, we already have too many meetings. We don't need more. Well, you have to have the right kind of meetings. You have to invest that time to get the end product. In your case, we have to invest the time and the labor to make that 9th chair so that you can have 8 to choose from. And if the missus, the lady of the house or the decision maker on that deal comes to you and says, I don't like this chair, you can say, well, how about this one? And we've got an option instead of saying, let's go back to scratch. You're never going to make a match to that chair, especially if you have those color variations.
Look, the other thing too, Dom, is that let's say you've got an order for 8 and you make the 9 and the 9th's fine, there's nothing wrong with it. Then you can go to Mrs. Smith and say, hey, look, we always make 9 to get 8. So we have this 9th chair. You could use this in the study or the spare bedroom. And that way, if you buy this chair from me, you've got it for that time when you need 9 chairs. And you'd be surprised how often they'll think, oh, that's a good argument. There anyway.
Well, and now, of course, they own that set. I don't want somebody else owning my chair.
Yeah.
And it's only another couple of $1,000s on top, so might as well throw it in the deal. You've just upsold.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, Evan, thank you so much for joining us here today. It's been very educational and learning a lot about bespoke furniture and the way you approach the market. I think there's been lots of lessons here that really come down to the metrics, the numbers, and knowing your numbers. And I think the other takeaway is I'm afraid of Fenella. I mean, that's just it. That's the big one.
Yeah.
But we do need to have somebody like that. By the way, you mentioned it's a challenge. We can't offer the quality of bookkeeping that you've got because your wife is a professional bookkeeper for others. One of the solutions for that other businesses have is they'll first to take the bookkeeping away from yourself.
Yes.
Have checks and balances in so that you have another bookkeeper come in on occasion and audit your bookkeeper's work. And that way you're not jumping from bookkeeper to full-blown accountant in your market, but you're having one bookkeeper do the work and another bookkeeper editing that work. And so your incremental cost is maybe another 15, 20%, but you're getting that check and balance there. By the way, that also does help with the internal fraud joke that I made earlier, because that's a real concern.
Yeah.
You just mentioned $1,800 and how much you're going to appreciate having that now in your cash flow. It's so easy for us to lose that money through, I don't want to take this onto a corporate fraud side, but it's so easy to lose that money and keep losing it and never know. And that would crush us all, Yeah.
Well, actually, there is something that Fenella did, which, for years she used to do all the bookkeeping, and she would get very frustrated with me because I used to, and I probably still do, treat the bookkeeping as, like a second tier priority, because I'm always worried about, making a perfect piece, talking to the craftsmen, talking to the clients. I'm like all small businessmen, I'm a busy guy, and sitting down and doing the bookkeeping always feels like a cost, not a productivity. And about 4 or 5 years ago, she forced me to do all the basic data entry and to develop a much more nuanced understanding of our cash flow. And I really resented it. I really, burred up over it and said, I could be making something, blah, blah, blah. And now I can see how right she was, because not that I track it more seriously, it's just my knowledge base is so much better. And I'm not a numbers guy, man. I think cutting up wood's new technology. So I hate using the accounting system, and I hate, I'm a bit dyslexic with numbers. Sometimes I, get them back to front and all of that.
Yeah.
But, one of the problems with small business is you get promoted to your level of incompetence. So, you got to know when to hand over things, but also when to embrace it.
When to embrace it and understand it. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, excellent. Lots of lessons here. Thank you so much for joining us here. Great to have you from Australia. We hope to have more people in your industry and more of your compatriots from over there in that the South, we call it the South Pacific, Australasian area.
Australia.
Yeah. Out in that area. So thanks so much for joining us. For everybody listening, thank you so much for taking the time. We know you've got lots to do. You have tons to do. Like Evan just said, you're busy and you'd rather be on the tools or doing something enjoyable. Hopefully you find this enjoyable. You like learning from a peer such as Evan Dunstone. And Evan, if they do want to see your website, sorry, can you repeat it again?
Yeah, it's www.dunstonedesign.com.au.
dunstonedesign.com.au.
That's it.
Excellent. Well, I'll put a link to that anyways in the show notes. There'll be a transcript of this interview as well on the website. And this is a video and it's a podcast. There's no shortage of ways for people to find you now and learn from you and maybe get inspired by some of your designs. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. And Evan, we'll talk to you again.
Thanks, Dom.